evening. Good to have you with us in this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, all around us, in our conversations, in news, on our social media, in interaction with our family and loved ones, all we are hearing are dreaded stories of struggle. Struggle to get a test, struggle to get a hospital bed, struggle for oxygen, struggle for a ventilator, struggle for somebody out there to listen to us and help us out and save our loved one's life. This is what it has come down to in our country, where obviously there is a COVID emergency. And every single Indian has stories to tell, experiences to share, and anger. There is simmering anger among so many of us about the way the system is failing us. There is anger and one question: who is accountable? Who is to be held accountable for that? No admission of failure, no admission of action being taken against those who didn't react on time, didn't plan on time, nothing from any of our governments. Things have become so bad that high courts across the country have now begun to step in. My team did a basic research and deep dive to find out that in the last 3 weeks, 12 courts, including the Supreme Court today, have stepped in to look into what's going on. The high courts, each one of these 11 high courts in different states of our country, extremely angry and very clearly, in no uncertain ways, saying that this is a failure of our governments to act on time. This is a failure of our governance, that people are dying there and we really need to wake up to save the lives. I'm just going to give you one sentence each from each of these high courts and what they have said in the last 3 weeks. Gujarat High Court, one of the first, especially at a time when there were reports after reports emerging that there is a mismatch in the death data records, what the government is telling us and what's going on in crematoriums. Especially when news came from city after city of Gujarat of how hospitals were flooded with patients and absolutely no space left. Gujarat High Court said the state did not pay heed to the suggestions that had been made earlier. Just one statement each, all of them have gone into details and we will keep running those details as well. Allahabad High Court, if people die of pandemic, it would be governments to blame. Patna High Court, patients are running helter-skelter to find beds. There is deficient infrastructure. Bombay High Court, extremely angry, going on to simply say what absolute nonsense is going on here. Delhi High Court, beg, borrow, steal, it is your job. Saying this to the government, it is your job to get oxygen. Both center and state have failed on considering migrants. Madras High Court, ensure that the state is prepared in terms of beds and ventilators. Madhya Pradesh, no popular government can afford to negate the basic human right to health. Karnataka High Court, duty of the government is to ensure that no COVID patient be deprived of availing beds. Calcutta, callous, irresponsible and nonchalant attitude, ensure strict implementations of EC's COVID norms. We all know what happened there. Punjab and Haryana High Court, non-availability of beds and oxygen supply is an issue. Situation is grim. Situation is grim. People are dying. What are you doing? Were the key themes that came out from everywhere. And what does this show? To me, it shows that there is absolute collapse of governance, and our states are to be blamed, our center and states are to be blamed for not acting on time, for not reacting on time, and for constantly only bickering, indulging in blame games and issuing denials instead of saving lives. So tonight, as 11 angry high courts put their message out, we open this up to citizens, people with their own experiences, their own stories, people who are trying to help out others, people who can see inside out how the system has completely collapsed. Tonight, India will speak up. I say good evening to the first set of panelists who are joining me right now. Vinay Tiwari, our managing editor from Mirror Now, Barkha Dutt, senior journalist, and Mr. Dushyant Dave, senior advocate of the Supreme Court, joins me this evening. First up to you, Vinay. So many of these comments that have been made by the High Courts literally echoing sentiment of the Indians tonight.
So here is the equation, Tanvi. In a space of 21 days, you have 12 courts, including our Supreme Court, passing judgment with one single theme. And that theme is that the governance is absolutely absent and people are absolutely at the mercy, crying for mercy literally and crying for help. And court after court, in state after state, has used some very, very scathing words and language to pull up what should have been an ordinary act of governance. Now, let me just put two things to set this whole thing up. It is perfectly understandable that no government anywhere in the world would possibly be ready to handle a caseload of the extent that may be thrown up in a pandemic of the size that we are seeing currently going in India. But what I'm unable to understand is that in that process, the basics of governance have completely been disregarded. There is a complete absence and a complete uncontrolled sense that that people get. We have death of empathy, we have death of morality, we have death of sensitivity, and we have death of basic regard. You have ministers holding up hearse vans with one body inside to flag it off. You have one politician who's holding up an oxygen tanker to flag it off and get himself standing next to it. You have a union cabinet minister who threatens to slap a person who's pleading for oxygen for his own family. And you have courts after courts telling the state governments, basis, of course, what is being reported in the media and what people are saying on social media, that state governments are systematically and sometimes unofficially stopping even basics like getting adequate tests done. In certain states, you cannot get a test done. In other states, if you get a test done, the report will not come for 4 or 5 days. A citizen today does not know where he or she can get oxygen. A citizen today does not have helplines which actually work or are picked up by people. Even if they are picked up, they all express helplessness in giving information. And now you have a situation where there is mass-scale fleecing and black marketing that is going on of not just oxygen, but key things like remdesivir and other medicines across the country. You have cremation grounds which are showing waiting lines of 12 to 13 hours. And you now have some fly-by-wire operators who are even offering packages on cremations. I'm afraid, in the year 2021, we have lost our morality. It's the death and the end of what we should call ourselves, which is human beings. There is one other fact, Tanvi, that I must point out, and why I believe that this is a colossal collective failure of governance that I have ever seen. Last year, when the national lockdown was first announced in late March, the reasoning for having an extended and a strict lockdown that was given to the nation was the priority of the government was to save lives. And that was an absolutely right decision because, of course, the government's priority should be to save lives. In a year, that priority cannot change. And if you see that in the conduct that you've seen from governments, whether it's the state government or the central government, that priority seems to have changed. We are no longer reacting to this aspect of people losing their lives, and a lot many literally at the edge of their lives right now, gasping for breath quite literally, with no plan and absolutely no sense of direction of which way this whole crisis is being managed. And this is not about one party. State after state, ruled by different parties, is displaying exactly the same colossal mismanagement and a complete failure to anticipate and even be remotely prepared to handle a crisis, even at the rudimentary level, Tanvi.
Yes, and what do we see? We see people, patients on the streets, on footpaths, lying there because there is no place in the hospitals and they're just waiting there, gasping, counting their last breaths. What do we see? We see hours and hours of waiting across crematoriums. There is waiting now going into days, simply so you can bid that final goodbye with some dignity to your loved ones. Absolute mayhem, Mr. Dushyant Dave. And what is shocking it in some of the cases, even when the court stepped in and asked questions, we saw absolute denial from some of the governments. Some governments like Gujarat even went ahead and blamed the media for hyping it up. Mr. Dave.
Well, let me tell you something. Buck does not stop at the level of the High Court or the government. The Supreme Court's conduct has been, if I may say so, with greatest respects to the institution that I love, has been disgusting. In last year, in August of 2020, I argued for Prashant Bhushan, a public interest petition filed by Center for Public Interest Litigation, where we wanted Supreme Court to issue a direction to the government of India to prepare a national plan to fight COVID, because there is none. The government of India filed a false affidavit before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court accepted it knowingly, in which they say we have a plan of 2019. That plan doesn't have a word about COVID. One. In the said petition, we said PM Care Fund should be treated as a public fund, and it should be subject to CAG control. The fund should be used for the benefit of COVID patients. The Supreme Court denied it. 3 judges of the Supreme Court, Justice Ashok Bhushan, Justice Reddy, and Justice M.R. Shah. I must say that Supreme Court will be remembered by history as one of the institutions which failed this country as much or as badly as it did during emergency in ADM Jabalpur case. What was wrong? I don't understand. There has been no national plan to fight COVID, because Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah are obsessed by West Bengal and Mamta. They have no interest in governance. They have been fooling this country for a long time, and the country wants to be fooled. That is why we are paying. Who is paying the price today? Not Mr. Modi, not Mr. Shah, not any one of the top politicians. They will all get extraordinary care and treatment in special cells of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Thousands of people are dying. Lakhs of people are on the street. Millions of people are crying because their relatives, friends are all dying or suffering beyond repair. Is this the kind of a nation that we want? This is a country where Supreme Court and Judiciary has singularly failed us. They have constitutional duty. What was Supreme Court doing? Mr. Justice, Chief Justice Bobde's intervention today is, to say the least, saddest moment in the history of Supreme Court. When High Courts are trying to save some lives, he intervenes. What has he been doing for last 6 or 8 months? He has been singularly sitting silent. He intervened in a petition in which he seeks to demolish mosques in Mathura and Varanasi, despite the fact that 5 judges have said these mosques have to be protected. This is the Supreme Court of India. This is the Supreme Court of India. It is an institution which, frankly, it is better that it shuts down rather than really projects itself as an institution for protection of fundamental rights of citizens. This Supreme Court, under these recent Chief Justices, including Bobde, have singularly failed to protect the lives of the citizens, singularly failed to correct the government for mismanagement. This is a country where we are now in complete darkness. The whole nation is traumatized, not these judges. They don't care a damn about anything. Post-retirement, somebody will
Mr.
get...
Dave, I understand completely.
So it's disgusting. I am sorry.
Yes, I understand completely, Mr. Dave.
Do not trust judiciary. Do not trust
with
judiciary.
you on the anger.
They have failed.
I am with you, Mr. Dave, on the anger. I understand where the anger is coming from, because you are seeing what everybody else is seeing. But I am still a believer of the judiciary, and I still believe that at some point...
No, I have been a lawyer for 42 years.
Yes, but I believe that the 11 High Court stepping in and asking questions would have made some impact somewhere, even if it is to give those answers to the courts, even if tomorrow it is to give the answer to the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court steps in now and says that this is emergency and a key issue where a national plan is made, Mr. Dave, I am hoping that there is some action and some impact of that.
Please don't believe those words.
Right. No, I understand completely where your anger comes from, sir. But let's just be those responsible people who continue, Mr. Dave, let's just be those responsible citizens who continue to have faith, at least in our judiciary.
Oh my God. Let me tell you today, today's intervention by Supreme Court perhaps suits the government. An appointment of Mr. Salve's amicus curiae is one of the last straw in the coffin of this democracy. I am really sorry to tell you that I don't want to have any... I respect the Supreme Court. I love it. I am part of it. But I still feel that Supreme Court
Yes.
has no business now to stop the high courts.
Okay, I understand where your anger is coming from. We can all still be hopeful. I have faith in the judiciary, and I think, where governments are failing us, where else do we turn to? Barkha, you've been traveling across the country, bringing us stories, and honestly, heartbreaking stories. Would you say that the fact that 11 high courts at different points have stepped in and questioned the governments is a clear sign that there is absolute collapse of governance?
Tanvi, thank you. At this moment, it's about 8:15 at night, and I'm sitting outside the emergency ward of a COVID hospital in Delhi. You have to come here to see what's happening, and what's happening in Delhi is what's happening in hospitals across the country. As you mentioned, I've been traveling through the COVID epicenters, including Maharashtra, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, to name just a few. It is a complete institutional collapse. And at this hospital, families are crying, they are breaking down, and there is not one human being of the Indian state available to talk to them. Nobody. The state has gone missing. There is nobody here to talk to people, to offer them some compassion, to show them some mercy, to even tell them how to get a hospital bed. We are treating people as if they're just little insects to be trampled upon. And one of the saddest things I saw at this hospital today, Tanvi, was a woman who came out crying because her bahu, her daughter-in-law, died. She's only in her 20s. She threw herself on the grass. I went to help her, and she said, nobody cares for the poor in this country. With all our privileges, yesterday I drove my own father to the ICU of Medanta Hospital. I got tense and I organized a private ambulance for him because the hospital's ambulances were overstretched and they would have taken a few hours. The ambulance that came had an oxygen cylinder that did not work. The ambulance drove through traffic snarls because the police had put up stupid barricades to control the curfew. Is that what's needed right now? So the ambulance, not just mine, but multiple other ambulances were crawling through the traffic. My father's oxygen levels dipped in a dangerous way, and he's now in the ICU. And this is me with money, with doctors that I know, with privilege. Come to government hospitals like this one. There are women crying behind me. I can barely focus on what I'm saying because I can hear the sound of men and women weeping. And they're all poor people and they have nowhere to go. And then this woman who I met, whose daughter-in-law died, she now can't find an ambulance to take the body to a funeral site. She's been begging every ambulance driver here कि मुझे please एक ambulance दिलवा दो, मैं body कैसे लेके जाऊं? There's not one person willing to help her. She's been here since 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Another family has gone to 6 hospitals, finally come here and failed to get a bed. You know, I was interviewing Dr. Velumani of ThyroCare on one of my own programs, and he said to me, when a person dies because you refuse him or her oxygen, it's not natural death, it is murder. Please let us call out what is happening. We are killing our citizens because we are unable to provide them what is their right as human beings.
It's just, heartbreaking at so many levels, and I don't understand what will it take for our governments to wake up. Why should the Supreme Court have to? Why should Gujarat High Court or Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh, any high court, have to step in and even ask these questions? This is a collapse of governance where we continue to live in denial. Thank you so much, Barkha. I hope your father recovers soon and he's back home soon, and I hope you continue to bring us the stories that you do. Thank you, Mr. Dave. Thank you so much for joining us. Vinay Tiwari continues to stay on with me as I say good evening to the next set of panelists, and we have Hartirat Singh, Community Development Director at Hemkund Foundation, and Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, former IPS officer, joining me this evening. And as I go to them, I want to again highlight what Delhi High Court said. The Delhi High Court held late night hearings last evening. You know why? Because hospitals knocked at the doorstep of the court. hospitals who've been running 24/7, that have a queue of patients standing right outside, people waiting for beds, people waiting for news of their loved ones, people struggling for oxygen, people waiting to even collect dead bodies. Those hospitals went to the court because they were running out of oxygen. When hospitals turn towards the judiciary and not your governments to help them in such emergencies, it tells you just how bad the situation is and that they are losing faith in the governments. The court had to say, beg, borrow, steal. It's your job to get oxygen. It seems human lives are not that important for the state. We are shocked and dismayed that the government is not waking up to the reality. And they even came up with suggestions on what can be done. Now, one can argue that it's not the court's job to step in and say ki Tata se oxygen lo, ya steel plant se oxygen nikalo, but what else is there to do when the governments will not act on time? Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, how can we be caught so off guard? Now, the netas may be busy campaigning for votes, but there is an entire bureaucratic setup which is there, whose job it is to continue with the policy making irrespective of who is at the helm.
In fact, if you recall, the government of India had made, I think, 10 or 11 empowered committees. Vinay would also support me on this, which were headed by the secretaries. And this was supposed to plan ahead, looking into the structure of the of things to come. It was supposed to look into the infrastructure. It was supposed to look into the future management, because mind you, even 6 months back, people were talking about the second wave or the third wave, and you people were doing an admirable job telling the people, of what is it coming by droplet, is it coming by air, what lies in future, what is the efficacy of the vaccine, etc., etc. So what I'm saying is these 3-4 months, there were enough time to look into it. Secondly, you see, there are states like Kerala or Chhattisgarh, for that matter, which have surplus oxygen. In fact, Kerala is now supplying oxygen to Goa. So it was efficient management, and they have one of the most efficient health ministers. So I'm saying is this is something which could have been managed. It's really so unfortunate. I heard Barkha. It's heartbreaking, but let me tell you today, myself, in my own small way, I've been just trying to get people hospital beds or oxygens. And I've been told that many of the hospitals, like in Gurgaon, even, they are not entertaining, COVID patients because they have run out of oxygen. Now, oxygen in a 3 trillion economy, not there, is it something, unbelievable. It's a tragedy of monumental, jargon town, whatever size you can say it. That's all I can say about it.
And what you said of how we are all in our own little ways trying to help out others, Vinay, I think while that is a great thing about the people in our country, and people are getting together in such large numbers, social media has actually become such an active platform in exchange of information. Information, Vinay, that should have ideally been coming from the government.
Tanvi, in a crisis and in an emergency and in a war, 4 things are extremely necessary. One is, of course, a crisis plan. The other is resources as best as possible. But the most important thing, and the one thing that no government today and no administration today understands even 1%, that is communication and information. Today, you have a situation where a citizen does not know who to call if he or she needs a cylinder of oxygen. Governments after governments will announce helplines which nobody will pick up. They will announce apps that will not work. They will have helplines where people will, if they pick up, they will express helplessness without giving any information. Social media, students of IIT, NGOs, good-hearted citizens, people who are just feeling a sense of responsibility, they are trying to fill in a gap desperately with 0 or no resources. The governments of this country in different states who sit on enormous resources have hundreds and thousands of bureaucrats at their command and have the most critical and the important thing, which is called the law, on their side, have not done anything about it. I understand that as I said at the start, it may be difficult for a government to provide unlimited amount of beds if the number of patients goes to 2 million or 1 million. But is it so difficult to run a helpline that works? Is it so difficult to let people know where I can go and get an oxygen cylinder? Is it so difficult for me to know which hospital I should go to where there is a bed vacant? There are reports after reports from cities after cities, Tanvi, where people are putting their loved one in an ambulance or a car and they're driving around for hours looking for a hospital for a bed. Is this was 21st century India, which advertises and pats itself as one of the top and the greatest country in the world, should be behaving? It's a shame, and I don't think that the governments are realizing that this is a shame that will make us look like the laughing stock of the whole world, because we keep patting ourselves in the back, we keep spinning things into making them look positive, while the reality is very rotten from within.
You are getting to that point. Allahabad High Court itself said, Vinay, that, one will laugh at us when you say that you have enough money to spend on elections, but you don't have enough money to create public health infrastructure. And that, unfortunately, is the reality of our country. And again, it's not about this current central government. It's not about one specific state government. It's literally how the system here is created. Harkirat Singh, good evening to you. Harkirat, you've been, also working, helping as many people as we can, trying to figure who needs oxygen where and how you can help them connect and get some more oxygen cylinders. Share your experience, and these the people who are coming to you, but did they feel let down by the governments? Did they even know where to go and ask for help? Did they know who was their local authority who could have helped them in times of crisis?
Good evening, Tanvi. But the people are clueless. Literally, the people of our nation are clueless. They are helpless and they don't know where to go. And the only hope they see right now in Delhi, NCR, Mumbai, and all the other states we're serving in is us. We're getting 12,000 calls across our 4 helpline numbers. We're getting thousands of Instagram DMs, 10,000 of Twitter mentions every day. And the people are just hopeless. We're only focusing to give oxygen cylinders, and we can only fulfill 20% or 30% of the requirement. Where will the rest go? They're all left outside the hospital beds. We're getting calls from big government hospitals, every night. You have an oxygen cylinder there, though we don't have cylinders. We're getting calls from the SHOs of the respective areas that, our hospital needs cylinders. But I'd say it's a collapse of the government, and it's a failure on their end. Definitely it is.
Harkirat, since you are out there and you're trying to arrange oxygen for people, help them, what would you want? And you interact with people, you hear their experiences, their stories. What would you want from the government right now? Clearly, they seem to be grappling and have no clue on what to do.
So when we can procure oxygen cylinders from different vendors, and we're actually importing them from across the states, you won't find a single cylinder in Delhi as of today. When we can get it from across states, why can't you? It's a simple question. So it's all about, getting our act together and working for the people. If an organization like ours can do it, if Hemkund Foundation can, why can't everyone else? It's not that difficult. But I would just urge people that, okay, it's a failure on the government, and you then support organizations like ours, because there's no other option left. We are doing the government's job right now.
That's the point, Mr. Azad, isn't it? People are having to do the government's job. Would you agree that there is a sentiment that we are now on our own? We can help out as many people as we can if we have ourselves the bandwidth to do so. Otherwise, we are on our own. So, I feel that's a sentiment that the courts seem to be echoing when they question the governments every time.
Two things I want to say here, Tanvi. One is, of course, that the government is totally overwhelmed and does not have a clue now, because it did not plan properly. Even today, one of the hospitals where I was trying to get somebody admitted said they cannot admit patients because their oxygen is held up in Rewari for some issue or the other. And Harkirat is absolutely right. What a great job he's doing, that he's able to manage it through some vendors outside. There are surplus states, and they like the power trading takes place. They could have easily done something about the oxygen too. The second thing which I want to say is that this Mahakumbh and these elections, I wish the court would have, this is failure of governance. In a time like pandemic, you cannot allow a Kumbh, you cannot allow a Shahi Snan, and you cannot allow elections. In fact, I was hoping that the new Chief Election Commissioner would have just said that either we postpone the elections for 6 months, no matter what happens, or have all these elections in one phase. I wish the Supreme Court would have taken suo moto cognizance and said this is no governance, which is allowing a kumbh, that no kumbh should be allowed and no elections would be held. I thought this was a time to do that because things were building up. And these things were building up right in the beginning. So it's definitely a question of a lack of planning and now complete mismanagement. As you know, Vinay was right so much when he said communication is a critical thing. Today, how does a person like me, except from Twitter and people like Harkirat, inform people what they should do if their oxygen is going to the 80s, or what they should do about an oxygen cylinder, or where they could find a bed? Because the bed position changes. And I had to ring up some Delhi government officer to find out whether a bed is available. And when he said one might be available in the afternoon. So this is the kind of communication, which Vinay and I are talking about, which is critical for governance at such times and which is lacking. And the reason is, of course, Tanvi, that the government is completely overwhelmed now because it did not plan. Today, it's impossible to do anything because, there's just too many people to look after. So the first thing is that the oxygen supplies shored up and people are given this assurance that these are the states, there is surplus, we are trying to get from here, this is the oxygen plant, their transports have been cleared, that people will not have the confidence. That is why communication is absolutely critical right now to assure the people.
Absolutely. And you raised a very important point, Mr. Azad, communication. In the first wave, the government would hold news briefings every day. Now, we used to track that very, very closely. We used to prepare our set of questions. We used to ask all of those questions on a daily basis, look at the information that the government is giving us, put it out for the people also to know. It's not happening anymore. We have one weekly conference, which is also limited in terms of number of questions that can be taken. I mean, today, I saw somebody ask this question on social media saying, where is Love Agarwal? Now, obviously, it's not just, the love for that one Babu who was sitting there and taking the questions, but the larger sentiment that where is the government and the set of officials who can answer our questions, who can tell us what's going on, who can tell us what is being planned. That is where the major failure is. I just want to let our viewers know this is information that's just coming in from the Election Commission that has now decided to say, because nobody is following rules and COVID norms, permission for road shows, cycle, bike, vehicle rallies, if granted already, stands withdrawn. Election Commission notes with anguish that many political parties and candidates are not adhering to prescribed safety norms during public gatherings. I mean, Vinay, if there is anybody who's been slower than our state governments, it has to be the Election Commission.
Oh, absolutely, without doubt. But Tanvi, there is one other thing, because Mr. Azad made one specific point. Let me just add to that. Let me be a little more generous to the Election Commission and to everyone else who takes decisions in this country. And in that generosity, let me say that, okay, the decision to hold the elections in the 5 states was taken at a time when the case count was not so high and we possibly did not see such a huge wave coming. But pray tell me, just yesterday we had the second phase of the UP Panchayat elections. Panchayat is a local self-government concept. No constitutional crisis will happen if panchayat elections are postponed. I can still imagine a constitutional crisis if a state government is not in place or a central government is not in place. But a panchayat not in place will not affect any constitutional functions. It's a self-governance model. Why do you need to do panchayat elections in a state in the middle of the worst crisis when your whole state has collapsed? Your own high court is pulling you up. That is the problem. And that's where I say that this is the collapse of sensitivity. So hard, so aggressive are you in your love for elections and politics and electioneering and campaigning and power that you're not even willing to let go of panchayat elections. And I just cannot understand what the logic for all of this is. I really cannot understand this. I mean, this is just beyond me, that even that decision cannot be taken, which can be taken at the State Election Commission level. You don't even need the ECI for it.
Well, as you make that point, let me tell our viewers that the numbers for Uttar Pradesh have just come in, the cases, and it's a really, really scary number. Uttar Pradesh is now reporting on a daily basis above 30,000 cases. Today, the case count is 34,379, 195 deaths. I mean, this is the government number, so I'm not going to go very seriously with the death figure here. It's definitely going to be higher than this. But total cases 34,379. In the first wave, the peak for Uttar Pradesh was about 7,000 cases, 7,016 cases. We have not only underestimated the virus, we've not only been caught unaware, we now just don't know what to do, and now it's each to his own, absolute mayhem and chaos, and the governments, honestly, in some of the states in our country, just don't know anymore what to do. A big thank you to Mr. Yashovardhan Azad and Harkirat Singh for joining us, and please continue to do the work that you're all doing. At the end of the day, I think we've come to a point that we're just helping out each other in whichever manner we can. Let me also say good evening to Neelam Kapoor, former Principal DG PIB, Dolly Singh, content creator, joining me right now. Dolly, the main theme of our conversation this evening has also actually been of how people are helping out each other. We are actually using social media a lot in terms of exchanging information, reaching out to those who may have access for or any information about beds or oxygen. But Neelam Kapoor, let me ask you this question first. Shouldn't this be something that the government should be able to communicate at the state level or even at the central level?
Definitely. I think on the communication side, we've left it too late. I think the messages have been very confused right from the start. We haven't given simple, clear directions about what people should do, how they should prevent this kind of thing happening to them. And now the public health system is totally loaded with the kind of infections we are seeing now. And in no country is a hospital system or a medical system geared to take this kind of a load. So prevention definitely, and the first line of defense cannot be hospitals, cannot be oxygen cylinders, cannot be medicines. It has to be preventive behavior. I think even now there is time to give very clear messages about masking up. Even now, people are not wearing masks properly, about sanitizing, about social distancing. This has to be said in very clear terms, in languages that people understand. We are still using technical terms as COVID appropriate behavior. I think our language needs to be simpler. It needs to be direct. I think that's very, very important. And to answer your second point, while civil society is doing what it is doing, can do, it is right now the district administration that has to step in, that has to micromanage, that has to look at where the gaps are coming, whether it's in terms of beds, whether it's in terms of medicine, or whether it's in terms of oxygen availability. A lot of district administration people have done this, but I think the portals are still not accessible by everybody. So we need to, I think, step in a much more aggressive manner. We need to do much more micromanagement. We need to get into detail so that whatever resources are available, they are immediately put into use.
Yeah, but the problem right now
Neelam,
is
I have
that
a very specific question for you. You've served the government for many years. Many.
Yes. Go ahead, Vinay.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask Neelam a specific question. You've served the government for many decades, and you've not only worked in the government, but you've also handled the information side of the government. And one of the biggest casualties that we see today is a simple information supply management gap that is creating mayhem for people. That is part A. And part B, this is something that when it happened last year, we pretty much knew. Most scientists and most doctors were of the opinion that this is not something that is over and it's going to come back. In your administrative experience, do you believe that we've kind of wasted a year not preparing and making ourselves more robust? Of course, you can never be prepared for millions of patients coming into hospitals, but surely there are things that can be improved in terms of the response patterns, in terms of the cohesiveness of the policy, and simple information provision, which is currently completely absent.
Yes, I tend to agree that we have lost an opportunity. I think we did get some breathing space where we could have reached out right to the rural level in communication strategies, in behavior change communication, in explaining to people what they should or what they should not do. But I also believe that this kind of communication has to be led in the front by leaders, whether it's the political leadership or whether it's the religious leadership or whether it is the civil society leadership. And we have not seen evidence of that, as some of the panelists before me said, that we have seen religious leadership and political leadership actually going into crowded areas without masks, whether it is for the political rallies, meetings, etc. So people have tended to disregard the advice on wearing masks. People have not taken this seriously. And I think that is where we have lost an opportunity. And sadly, India has done this in the past. India has done it with polio. India has done it with smallpox. And much more recently, India has done it with HIV/AIDS, when India was labeled by WHO as the next capital of HIV/AIDS infection. And this was prevented purely on the basis of communication. We had no medicines, we had no other preventive measures at that time. So I think we have definitely lost an opportunity. We have expertise available in our country for this, but we have not really understood the seriousness of the issue.
Yes, and very often these days when we speak to the government representatives or even the political party representatives, sometimes even experts who are in these committees advising the governments, they seem to suggest that this wave just caught us unaware. And my point every time is, well, we knew in February at least, even if you had to ignore the other warnings that the experts had given that there would be a second wave, as it has been across the world. We knew in February the numbers had begun to rise. We knew months ago, as late as last November or December last year, that there was a double mutant that was doing the rounds. The signs were there for everybody to read in the government and react if they wanted to. But perhaps there were other important things for our states to look at, including elections. Dolly Singh joins us this evening as well. Dolly, I think this is one of those times where, honestly, where governance seems to be failing. It's people helping people, and social media becoming the key platform for communication and information sharing, information that would have otherwise come from the government. What have your experiences been, around people? I know you've also been personally involved in helping out and sharing information as much as you can.
I think we've just, this is, people are trying to help each other because there's no other help which is being provided right now. We have no information, we have no sources, resources, anything. So I think everybody is doing what they can. And thanks to social media, there's so much you can do even while staying at home. So many people have, made pages. So many people have made lists, apps. I haven't honestly seen any government, portal or anyone doing anything of the sort to give us information or line it up for us or help in any way. All the numbers are busy. Every day we wake up, we have these groups actually now, all of us social media influencers, creators, we have these groups where we keep collating, information and making lists and verifying information. Even my partner has called like 1,000 people today just to verify whether people have these resource, oxygen, bed, all of these things. And while I really appreciate people coming together and it's such a beautiful thing to see, it's also very sad that we've been left to do this, to come to this place where it's just us for each other. We don't really have anyone looking out for us.
And these helplines that you speak about, these are, again, individuals, groups who've put together information or any kind of infrastructure and emergency services, or are these government helplines that you look for and then share information?
Oh, Neeta, these are mostly individuals who've been, actually doing so much work in terms of finding out the leads and finding out what people are selling in terms of, remdesivir or any other medicine that is required, or oxygen, who are the people who can give us, oxygen cylinders in this area. So I think it's just people trying to help each other, and we've actually managed to help a lot of people with leads today, with beds, with other things that they probably require, even something as simple as food. for people who have been in quarantine at home. So these are, as far as I know, these are not people from the government or officials that are supposed to be doing this. These are actually just normal people, just people who are trying to be good citizens and helping out each other. And, I've seen so many. In fact, I told people the other day that social media is so powerful that even if you have 200 followers, please open your DMs for these kind of requests, because you never know where you might save a life. And thankfully, it has been happening. I won't say that the numbers are amazing, in terms of we've saved so many lives, because for the last 2 days, I've actually woken up to more messages where people have said, can you please delete the story? The person has passed away. So I won't say that the situation is getting any better. It's heartbreaking to see what's happening. But the social media has come as a very, very, resourceful asset to us right now. On Twitter, I think it's been amazing. People can just type in their location and look for any kind of leads they want. So I think social media definitely has come through. I'm not sure about anybody else.
And I understand, what you mean, to the heartbreak that comes along with it. Every single time when you're not able to help out somebody, and somebody needs something urgently, but you've actually run into dead ends at every corner, or like you said, that you're sharing information and the response that comes is, well, this person is no more. You're trying to save a life, but before anything can happen, we've lost that life. People are coming together at this point and working together. Obviously, very aware of the fact, Vinay, that there is really not much that they expect from the government. Like Dolly was pointing out, and I wanted her to clarify that because it's so important. They're not sharing government helplines. They're not sharing government details or access information of any kind. This is, again, information about individuals and groups who are out there helping others. Vinay.
Actually, I haven't. I'm sorry to cut you off, but if you notice, you will see that people on social media are not. Sorry. They're not requesting, in general situations like of crisis, whenever we've had, people are always tweeting to the officials or the politicians, can you help? Can you look at this? I see that now people have kind of given up. They are tweeting at us. They are messaging us in terms of what they need, what is it that is required. And although, I like it, but, you see that change has happened. We don't really have any hope on the other side. So people are not even bothering so much.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know what else to add to it, but that's the plain, simple truth. Vinay?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, the point, I think the larger point that everybody is making is this. Yes, it is entirely possible that all help and every single citizen may not get the exact help that one is looking for. But every hour or every minute or every 2 hours that you help somebody save in terms of giving information that allows them to access something quicker and faster is a life saved. There are so many instances from cities after cities where, because of the absence of information about where the bed is available or where a medicine is available or where oxygen is available, people are traveling around with their loved ones in cars and in vehicles and in ambulances for hours on end. That's a criminal act. Information can save lives and it can help people. Also, information about proper services available will also help prevent overload that is happening in certain hospitals or certain places. In the absence of information, everybody tends to land up at a place where they think is bigger or larger and end up adding more load to it, even though there may be some spare capacity available somewhere else, which may be smaller or maybe slightly distant, some distance away. But when you do not have any mechanism for that, even though it's always put out, some state governments have put out, very nice looking Excel sheets. But when you start calling up those numbers, nobody's taking those calls. One particular state government, I think Gujarat probably, one state government has put up numbers of all the CMOs in the districts. But when you call those numbers, they don't take the calls. So then there is no point. And this reduces the trust. And because it reduces the trust is when you have situations where people stop reaching out to them and they reach out to, social media or NGOs or anyone else who's attempting to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much to Neelam Kapoor and to Dolly Singh for joining us here on this conversation, and please continue, helping out the way you are. That's what it's come down to right now. Let me also say good evening to our next set of panelists. Shikhar Agarwal, co-founder for Help Now, joins us this evening, and Justice Gyan Sudha Mishra, former Supreme Court judge, also joins us this evening. Justice Mishra, I want to start off with you. We actually collated all the comments in the hearings and orders that have come from various courts, high courts, and of course today Supreme Court in the last 21 days. And we found that 12 courts, 11 high courts and the top court have actually now pulled up governments or have had very hard-hitting, scathing things to say about the COVID management in our country. And I just want to give one more example, one of the examples from this, where the Telangana High Court went on to say, the state seems to be contending for the position of COVID topper in the country. What are you going to make the people of the state do? Sitting ducks? Response has no details of measures to check footfall in public gatherings. This was what the state had to say about the information that the state had submitted. So it's not as if the courts are getting any better information out of the states either. The court then goes on to say, government is beautifully silent on controlling interstate travelers, a desperate situation which required desperate action by the state. Justice Mishra, do you see this action by so many high courts as a proof that governance has failed in our country in terms of COVID management?
You see, insofar as normal circumstances are concerned, the courts would generally not like to intervene with the administrative machinery of a government. But that's the theoretical aspect. We all know that under the Constitution, we have theory of separation of powers. But this is an extraordinary situation which all of us are facing. And in that circumstance, if the courts have gone to the extent of intervening and giving directions, then of course it's justified. But now coming to your question, is it a failure of the administrative machinery? You see, I would not go to the extent of saying that, because it's not something which was anticipated. The second strain of COVID has been taken all of us unawares. So if the efforts are being made by all of us and a collective effort is required, then obviously the courts have every right to find out what measures have been taken. But the question is that if you are, we cannot, I for myself would not go to the extent of saying failure of administrative machinery at this stage, because for the very obvious reason that it's going to have a very, very demoralizing effect on the system. And instead of, it's like going from frying pan to the fire. So let us not demoralize whether it be individual or a government by saying that it's a failure. But yes, nevertheless, we cannot lie low. Even the courts cannot lie low and say that you have not taken. If you have taken, then all of us should collectively put our effort and our thinking how to improve the situation. And it can come from all quarters. So it is most welcome that if all the all the organs are, trying to put itself to remedy the situation, that's a commendable effort. And I would not go, at this stage, you see, whenever there's a very grave situation, criticism is not of any assistance, rather it demoralizes. It can put us more into soup rather than improving the situation. That has been my take on this question. So, and I'm happy that, other
Okay, thank you so much for putting it that, beautifully, the way you've shared your thoughts. Let me also bring in Shikhar Agarwal, co-founder for Help Now. Shikhar, Do you think that many people today, people like you, have had to step out and set up these systems to help others because there seems to be a clear vacuum, a vacuum that should ideally have been filled up by the governments?
Yeah, sure. I think, last year, in fact, after COVID, we got a time to get prepared ourselves, because we were just operating in Mumbai and serving ambulances. Ambulances were in shortage, right? And now the situation is, we are getting calls, we are able to serve people, we are able to send the ambulance, but they are canceling the trip, saying that there are no beds available in the hospital they want to go, right? So situation is this, that they are getting the ambulance, but beds are not available, or oxygen ki so much shortage in oxygen cylinders. Yeah, medicine, we are getting huge number of requests every single day. And many people are supporting us. Our helpline number, we are getting hundreds and hundreds of requests, not just for ambulance, but for hospital beds, yeah, for medicines. So I think more could have been done. The gap that we got between the first lockdown and the second lockdown, right? I think that would be my take on that.
Okay, I am completely out of time. I wish I had more time to speak with Shikhar, and I actually had many more questions for Justice Mishra. So I do hope, Justice Mishra, you join us again some other day, but completely out of time on this one. So thank you so much. Vinay, thanks so much for staying with us through this special broadcast. I think Vinay and I both very strongly believed that what the message was from various high courts is something that needs to be looked at as a bigger picture. And we both believe that the bigger picture is the fact that governance seems to have collapsed in state after state. It is not the job of the courts to come in and dictate policies. It is not even the job of the courts to otherwise meddle with existing policies or to push governments in a certain direction. That's not what they would ideally want to be doing. But like Justice Mishra said, extraordinary situations perhaps do then justify extraordinary actions. And in this case, most of the courts that you see, the 11 different high courts that I was telling you about, most of them have actually stepped in by themselves, taken suo motu cognizance of the situation, and then passed orders. Completely out of time on this one. Stay with me, lots more on the other side.